Hey folks, so we are a little bit late today. Pretty on brand, unfortunately, but it is what it is. So today we are going to talk about unlearning productivity shame. So rest, worth, and capitalist expectations. So first, for a lot of for society in general, for Western society, there's a lot of belief that our value depends on productivity, right? And especially when you're neurodivergent, part of that is like the idea that um, the values about like being consistent or kind of having regular output or like keeping up, right? And so the shame that we feel when our energy or focus or capacity or mood fluctuates, we really kind of internalize those things, right? It's those internalized messages, or we take in those messages that are kind of outside of us, and we internalize them of being, too much or not enough or behind or, not keeping up, things like that, right? And I think the thing that we really have to think about and realize is that the shame isn't personal; it's systemic. It's baked into the system. I mean, they're already not realistic, even if you're neurotypical, right? Um, but even if you are, it's a little bit easier to kind of adhere to them, or at least easier than it is for somebody who's neurodivergent because they're built kind of for linear energy patterns, right? They're not really built for hyper focus or the fluctuations or the high productivity, the low times, working on things that you're disinterested in or that are boring, which makes it really, really difficult often for us to do those things. Not because we're lazy or because we don't want to, but just because it's hard, right? Capitalism kind of rewards predictability, speed, and sameness a lot of the times, which is ironic because a lot of entrepreneurs are often neurodivergent, often without realizing that they are. And it's because we have that kind of outside the box thinking and the impulsiveness and the risk taking, which are all great things, but on kind of higher level, in terms of like actual day to day production, um, that isn't oftentimes a bonus, or helpful. That's often detrimental, right? So neurodivergent ways of kind of thinking and interacting and resting and collaborating and working don't really fit the mold of consistency, right? And so really the problem is the system, it's not our brains. It's that the system doesn't fit our brains. And rather than recognizing that, and trying to work with to accommodate us and our strengths, we're often punished. We're often told that we're not doing things properly or we're let go, um, and that can really damage your self-esteem. I know for me, it really did. I, for the longest time, had a really hard time holding on to jobs, not because I wasn't good at my job. I'm great at my job, but because I didn't fit within their systems. And I would ask questions and I would push back and I would advocate. Um, I would disrupt the system, and system don't like that, right? So one of the ways that productivity shame often shows up for neurodivergent folks is comparing yourself to neurotypical timelines or capacity. There's a study, and I can't remember it, and I know I hate kind of the whole "trust me, bro" source, but I remember reading an article or a study where it talked about they kind of tracked neurodivergent or ADHD productivity compared to kind of neurotypical productivity, and what they found was on a daily basis that the neurotypicals outperformed the neurodivergent or the ADHD. But what they found was when they kind of extended the timeline, so it was like a week or two, the ADHD person would often either match or sometimes exceed the neurotypical, right? So if you're comparing yourself to neurotypicality and you're like, I can't be consistent, it's not about your productivity doesn't hit. It's that you're not looking at a long enough timeline, right? We often mask to appear productive or functional, whatever that can mean, right? Um, it working within capitalist systems often creates and reinforces burnout cycles, because we push past our limits. A big one, especially if you're late diagnosed neurodivergent, is you're like, well, I could do this when I was younger. Like, why do I struggle with this now? I'm in my early 40s. I cannot do the same things now that I could in my early 20s, or I can, but my recharge and rate is much longer than it was when I was in my 20s. I mean, I could, go to class all day. I could go work a job. I go hang out with friends. Go to bed at like 3 in the morning, and then get up for an 8 o'clock class the next day. I mean, I'd be tired, but I could do it. Now, if I tried to do that, Jesus, I need a week to recover, right? Um, Another way that kind of productivity shame often shows up is guilt. It's guilt during rest, right? Even when it's medically or neurologically necessary, when this is needed. This is not like, oh, I just I want to just chill. It's like I need to recover. There's a reason why people don't work out 24/7, 7 days a week. You need to build in restoration, right? And part of that is, feeling like your rest needs to be justified or explained. Sometimes, you just want to break. Sometimes you want to have some fun. You shouldn't need to explain that or justify that to anybody. Inconsistent capacity is not a character flaw. There's nothing wrong with us, right? Our energy is often, very varied. It's variable. It goes up, it goes down. We're gonna have low energy days, low mood days, times when we have brain fog, sometimes when we're hyper focused on something, sometimes when we're hyper focused on something that we don't necessarily want to be, right? Focus, motivation, stamina, they can change from day to day, hell, sometimes hour to hour, right? This variability, it's built into our neurological condition. It's not a lack of discipline or willpower, right? Can white knuckle, through it for a while, but it's not about willpower. It's it's just this is the way that our brains work. So instead of trying to fit within that neurotypical kind of capitalist model or mode, try to figure out what works best for you, right? One of the things that's really hard is that capitalism pathologizes neurodivergence, right? It makes our struggles seem like a personal failure, right? Accommodations are treated as exceptions rather than necessities, as things that, like, oh, you want or that would make your life easier, as opposed to things that are that you have to have. And when I talk to people about workplace accommodations, I'm like, the things that we are as neurodivergent people are asking for are things that often will benefit everyone, neurodivergent, neurotypical. But for a neurotypical person, it's helpful. For a neurodivergent person, it's necessary, right? Neurodivergent bodies and brains are expected to adapt to the system rather than the system adapting to us. That's a big part. And that's why I often talk about, well, how can we make your life more neurodivergent friendly? What does that look like? Whether that's at home or work or school or wherever it may be, right? Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you don't want to let people know that you're neurodivergent for fear of ostracization, RSD, being turned down for opportunities, at work, impacting friendships, relationships. So it's part of like, one, how can we work on continuing to try and lift the stigma, but also how can we, work on creating safe places where we can, and what does that look like? Because it's going to be different for everyone. But a really, really big piece is, separating your worth from your output. And this is something I've talked to people about is you are valuable even when your capacity is low, even if you're not able to do anything. I have to say to people, I'm like, if somebody is disabled or is, incapable of work or of, being productive, does that remove their worth? And people are like, no, of course not. So I'm like, so why is it that that applies to them but not to yourself, right? You are worthy, even when you can't or don't want expectations. Your existence is not for the sole benefit of the capitalist system for productivity, right? You have value and worth as an individual, regardless of your ability to produce. Right? We need to look at rest as recovery, as access. It's not an indulgence. It's not something that, it's like, oh, it'd be nice to have. This is necessary. Recovery supports nervous system regulation and sensory recovery. I know for myself, when I'm hitting burnout, um, I need that recovery time. And it can look like many different things. Sometimes it's working out, sometimes it's not working out. Sometimes it's, playing a game, sometimes it's doing housework, sometimes it's taking a hot bath, right? You need to figure out what recovery looks like for you. It's not always, bubble baths and reading a book, right? Recovery prevents or at least slows down shutdowns, meltdowns, and long-term burnout. For everyone, recovery is a part of accessibility, even more so for neurodivergent people. Because it's not just mental, a lot of times it's physical as well. There's a lot of physical issues that are much more common if you're neurodivergent than if you're not. But let's talk about why rest can often feel unsafe. Because many neurodivergent folks learned early that their worth comes from performance. They can't just be, they have to do. Rest or recovery may kind of trigger a fear of being judged, abandoned, or perceived as lazy, right? Slowing down can bring up that internalized ableism that we have that's been put on us that we've taken in. As I you know earlier, right? Unlearning productivity shame is hard, right? It's trying to replace why can't I do more with, well, what does my nervous system need? Or not, instead of why can't I do more, it's what can I do? What is necessary to be done and what can be left or done another time or delegated, right? It's learning that we don't have to do everything. That if we do choose rest or recovery, that is being productive. Right? Capacity, knowing your capacity is information. It's not judgments. We need to know our limitations. Sometimes yes, we have to push beyond them, but that can't be a regular everyday occurrence because that leads to burnout. And when we think about limitations, we're like, oh, I shouldn't have limitations. Everybody has limitations in some area, in some ways of their life. Pretending that you don't is dumb and it's not realistic. Practice recovery without apology or explanation. You don't owe anybody an explanation for why you need or want recovery or how often you do or what you do. It's nobody's business. Now, obviously, if you have a partner and you have a family and you do need to talk to them because things do need to be done. But that's a conversation to be had. You need to know where your limits are so you can explain that to people and we can work within those. And same for them. Notice when you're measuring yourself against neurotypical standards, right? Stop gaslighting yourself into believing that, well, I might not have neurodivergence. Or if I do, well, it's not that bad. Or I can just handle it. Even if you can, why should you? Nobody does things alone. Nobody. So, let's try and reframe success for neurodivergent folks, right? Instead of trying to tie success to productivity, is why don't we tie it to sustainability, not constant output, or meeting your needs, not overriding them or ignoring them, or staying regulated enough to keep going, knowing kind of where your limits are and staying within them. Productivity shame thrives in isolation. Same with depression, right? Community is the antidote, right? Connection, engaging with and being around and connected to neurodivergent affirming people and places and spaces reduces self-blame. It sees that you're not the only person struggling with this, that this is something that everybody in one way or another you know struggles with. We're often able to heal faster when we stop trying to appear or mask as neurotypical. It's hard because we feel like we've failed a lot of the times when we unmask in our our authentic selves. It's hard, but it's necessary. So this is something that I want you to think about. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're navigating a system that was never built for you, that you probably thought that you were a part of that system, that you were neurotypical for many years. And now that you know that you're not, you're having to learn how to navigate a new way to navigate a system that already didn't work for you, even when you thought that it did. Recovery is not giving up. It's how neurodivergent people survive and ultimately thrive. So if you want to move from survival to thriving, reach out, talk to somebody, get help. And if you're looking for uh, mental health supports in London or Ontario, we have therapists that are able to work with you that are neurodivergent themselves and understand kind of what this whole struggle is about. And if you're wanting um, to get some physical help or release, we have a non-RMT massage therapist, and we have a couple of physiotherapists that are coming on within the next month. So if you are in the London area and you're looking for help with physiotherapy and massage to kind of feel better in your body physically as well as mentally, we encourage you to come on out. So thank you for listening, and miigwech.